Blast from the grassroots, connecting people and sharing ideas.
Hey, this is Arlene, and we are listening to ii.ASEAN, the voice of discovery and sharing. At our second segment today, we are going to tackle an issue that is rarely being discussed in public, which is the topic on sexual harassment. We have two very young and enthusiastic, I'm not sure whether to call them feminists or women activists, but they are definitely passionate on the subject of sexual harassment. I'm talking about Paik and also Mohani Niza. Hi.
Hello.
So both of you guys are passionate on this particular area, sexual harassment. But what exactly is sexual harassment? Maybe we can have Mohani Niza to answer this first.
Sexual harassment is any unwanted verbal or physical attention. It can occur between men and women. It can be between men and men, women and women. But mostly it occurs between men over women. And it is not a form of sexual attraction per se, but more of, it's about power. Because men, it is a patriarchal society in Malaysia. And therefore, sexual harassment is a form of power over from men towards women.
But why it is commonly occur between men and women, or men over women?
Because it is a patriarchal society in Malaysia. Patriarchy is basically about how men dominate over women, and this is why sexual harassment occurs. It's because the way men objectify women, maybe through media, maybe we can see through media, maybe we can see through our culture. We socialize men and boys to dominate over women and to not respect women and girls.
And what about you, Paik? On your personal observation on sexual harassment, what exactly it is?
I kind of agree with the definition of sexual harassment as what Mohani had said. Although I think sexual harassment is very prevalent in Malaysia in the sense that because we are women, we experience a lot of men sexually harassing women. But I think on a global scale, it doesn't matter whether you're a man, woman. Basically, sexual harassment for me is just having somebody else feel uncomfortable about unwanted sexual advances.
Mm-hmm. Mohani Niza, earlier on you mentioned about patriarchy or patriarchal. The word patriarchy itself is a very heavy word, but what does it really entails in that particular system?
I see. Patriarchy is a set of values and norms that privilege men over women. There has been a lot of debates around this concept, but we can see that even though in Malaysia we're not as bad as countries such as Afghanistan and Iraq, for example, we can say that men dominate women in this country, like in the way that society perceives women. We see women as weak, as sexual objects, as victims, as nurturers and not leaders and not protectors. So therefore, this kind of thinking gives way to a lot of disrespect.
So in Malaysia, even though women rights movement has advanced to a certain degree, do you think patriarchal is still very much a prevalent sort of system in this country, Paik?
I suppose patriarchy, if it's about power over in general, then yes, of course, it's a system of thought. Mm-hmm. I suppose that I'm not giving much comment on that because personally, I suppose I'm more interested in people's stories and personal experience as opposed to
the term itself,
the concepts. Yeah.
But on a personal experience, do you see example of situation where women were not given the kind of treatment as equal in terms of gender?
I suppose that in terms of, when it comes to the issue of sexual harassment, I don't really think that it's only specifically to women. I think sexual harassment happens to a broad, basically it can happen to anybody. It doesn't matter whether you're a boy, girl, man, woman.
But could it be the result of a patriarchy system, or could it be something that it would happen in irregardless what kind of system we are living in?
I think it probably happened because of, from my little understanding of patriarchy, then yeah, it's probably because that sexual harassment happens because of patriarchy, because it's generally about power and having power over somebody and making somebody else feel uncomfortable. So in that essence, then yes, patriarchy does perpetuate sexual harassment, among other things.
You have something to add on, Mohani?
Yes, I would like to differ on Paik's point though. Even though sexual harassment also happens to men and boys, and I've personally witnessed it, but I also believe that it's something that impacts women more than it does men. And it goes back to our point about patriarchy, about how Malaysia is a patriarchal country.
But nevertheless, sexual harassment, whether it happens more towards women or towards men, irregardless, it's still very much a topic that is taboo within society. Why do you think young women, because you guys are young women, do not really have, I guess in general, not trying to be discriminative, in general, not really have the kind of guts to actually speak out? So why do you think this kind of situation is happening? Is it because young women of today are naturally shy, or is it because the kind of system or the kind of social norms that we are living, where women really do not really speak out about their own personal sexual experiences?
I suppose that's like a really big discussion, right? So I'll just break it down to a small bit. I think first of all, sexual harassment is so hard to define in some sense, because
where do you put the boundaries?
Where do you draw the boundaries? So if we, in the patriarchy system where you expect the men to be forward with the woman, right? I mean the stereotypical, like, I'm the man, I'll look after you kind of thing, and the woman's supposed to be passive. Then how do you say this? Like, the dynamics is so vague, you know. Like, let's say if I'm hitting on you, man to man, woman to woman, whatever, like anything, and you don't like my advances, if you don't speak up, that means the other party doesn't speak up. It is sexual harassment, because I'm making you feel uncomfortable. So it's
but
so
what if
vague.
the person are not even aware that he or she is making the other person uncomfortable?
Exactly. So that's why I think, like, sexual harassment is so, it's not taboo. It's just that it's so not direct. Yeah, I mean, like, so let's say if I touch you, then, you know, that is molestation. Whereas sexual harassment, like, let's say if I say some, maybe to me it's just a joke, but to you, you feel uncomfortable, right? And I'm not advocating that making sexual jokes is great or anything. I'm just saying that it's the dynamics and relationship between two people. So sometimes it's so hard to pinpoint that this is sexual harassment per se. And I think that's why I'm very interested in this topic, because of
You want to understand how to form an idea what sexual harassment is all about? Would that be the case?
I suppose for me, it's not so much about forming the idea of what sexual harassment is. It's how, as an individual, on the individual basis, and, you know, if you start with individual, then you can move on to society, how we can deal with this uncomfortableness, and how, as a woman, I can deal with this stuff.
Yeah, I would like to. I've heard a lot of comments. People saying that sexual harassment is very vague and is a very tricky terrain to be on. But I also believe that women's voices, and because we women, I believe that women are raised to know, like, what is right and what is wrong. And I believe in listening to the women. It's not a matter of, I don't want people to say, oh, sexual harassment is vague and therefore sweep it under the carpet, because sexual harassment is a very, very important issue. What we need to do is we need to listen to the women, because at the end of the day, it's not the consequence of the sexual harassment that matters. It's it's not the intention that matters. It doesn't matter whether the man intends to sexually harass the women or not, but the fact that it does happen, and this is how we can make sexual harassment into a concrete idea.
So I guess the biggest problem about sexual harassment is the awareness of sexual harassment itself, because you can like talk a lot about it among yourself, but at the end of the day, if the men and women in general have no idea what actually is the boundaries of sexual harassment, then anyone can perceive anything, right? I mean, for example, maybe for me being too friendly to another person might be perceived as something as sexual harassment to that particular person. So are you saying that education is the key to somehow create that awareness? Where can we put the boundaries of sexual harassment, or if it ever occur, things can be resolved in a manner where it's about understanding our own spaces between different human beings, rather than accusing, oh, this is sexual harassment, you are the bad guy and I'm the good person?
I think you brought up an interesting point about creating spaces for me, I suppose. So I think I fully agree with Mohani in how like it shouldn't be swept under the carpet. That's why we're having this conversation here today. And I suppose like where I'm coming from is, as what you mentioned, that sometimes like maybe on the other side of the party is like that person didn't intend to. Of course, that we all women, we all have had that sleazy glare from people, right? Like we all get that. That's kind of like macam geli lah. You know, like you feel like geli. But I mean, on the situation where, you know, sometimes where maybe me being too friendly and the other person taking it as a different intention, then yeah, that's the vagueness I was talking about. And I think like on an individual basis, all we can actually, one of the ways we can deal with it is maybe having women to speak up and say, hey, I feel uncomfortable with this, because if we don't speak up that we are feeling uncomfortable, the other person might just take it as, what you call it? If you keep silent, then nobody's going to help you. That's my point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mohani, you want to add on something? I'm sure you have personal experiences and observation that you would like to share with us.
I agree with you that education is a big step. Will be a big step in eradicating sexual harassment, because at the end of the day, our actions stem from our values and our thoughts, and our behavior stems from what our prejudice. So if we define what it is to be a woman and what it is to be a man, to be, you know, like, for example, if we teach boys and girls if we teach boys to respect girls, then yes, sexual harassment.
And vice versa as well.
Yeah,
I suppose.
Versa.
Yeah.
Vice versa. Yeah.
And that's patriarchy, right? Patriarchy tells you that, you know, boys should be a certain way and girls should be a certain way, right?
But Mohani, based on your personal experience and observation, why there's a huge ignorance among people about sexual harassment in general?
I think that at the end of the day, I'm not so sure why, because like I haven't done any research into this, but it's just the fact that it is a conservative country, and women are usually taught to be silent and to be passive, and to receive sexual harassment jokes as something that they deserve. You know, people will say, "Oh, you're just so mengada," or "You're just like making it up," or "You're making a big fuss out of nothing," which is tied to the very fact that women should not speak up in the society. And I think that is why women are mostly silent. But I have a group called SMASH. It stands for Malaysians Against Sexual Harassment. And I am very surprised to see that there are over 100 people sign up to my group. And I find that this is a very wonderful step. And I believe that Malaysian women do realize that their rights have been infringed and that sexual harassment is wrong.
It's funny because we ourselves, young women, especially when we work in an environment where it is male-dominated, sometimes we are not even aware we are being sexually harassed, because to us it's like, oh, this is normal because we are the only girl in the whole male-dominated office, so we just have to brave along, whatever the situation is, and accept whatever remarks or the kind of snares that came along with it. But do you think that's the right way to do, or there should be like some other way of addressing the issue of women, being young, attractive? Sometimes you don't even have to be attractive. You just have to be woman, and then being receive and then having to receive this kind of attention from men.
There must be a mechanism put in place. There has to be a formal mechanism that is put in place. Currently, there's a code of prevention of sexual harassment in the workplace, and it only applies to the corporate sector, and it only applies to the companies that agree to have that code of policy. And I believe that is wrong. I believe that there must be a standalone sexual harassment bill that applies to all companies, whether private or public, and which punishes and which puts the onus on the men to be punished rather than women, like for example, resigning from the offices or anything.
Mm-hmm. What about your view?
I think the law can be in place, but then there has to be a cultural shift in the perception of the society itself also. I mean, if there's the law, but then and we punish them and culturally, sexual harassment sometimes is, I mean, it can be also very subtle, like how you say, like they just make snide remarks, like, and it's easy to get away with that. So I think that there needs to be a cultural mind shift in the Malaysian society. In part, probably women need to learn how to articulate and speak up. I mean, if something's wrong being done to you, then yes, we need to voice it out.
So to you, the law shouldn't be like the only solution
I think
to address
because of
sexual harassment.
Sorry. I think also because personally, as a young woman at 16, when I was walking on the streets, I mean, and basically I got molested, and I went to the police, the Malaysian police, and I knew that it, because I felt empowered enough to speak out, and I just felt that I need to report this so that other people won't have to deal with the same thing. And it's quite appalling. I'm not saying all Malaysian policemen are like this, but it's just one person. Basically, he asked me if it's my boyfriend, and he said no. And then after that, at the end of it, after interrogating me I felt interrogated. He said, "Buat apa nak buat report?" So I think we can have all the laws we want, but if even the law or the people who are
enforcers of law
do not even take it seriously, then it kind of makes me feel like, okay, like it really made me feel really bad, and then
and make you feel like actually you are the crazy one,
or I'm
making a big deal out of nothing.
So I think like as much as sometimes because I'm not well versed with law, so I tend to focus on cultural mind shifts lah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Mohani, if the law itself cannot be addressed, as quickly as we want, because right now, as we all know, we don't have a standalone bill on sexual harassment. What can we do now to address the cultural part of the sexual harassment, the cultural shift?
I think discussion is very important, and this discussion must take place on a very national level, maybe through the media, for example, where maybe more women should speak up and, should write about their sexual harassment experiences and what can be done, because I've been surveying the response to the sexual harassment in the media, and I've only read about 2 or 3 pieces about sexual harassment. I'm not so sure why women are not speaking up about this more, but maybe it's because, like I said, it's tied to the fact that women in Malaysia are socialized to be passive and silent.
But are women ourselves taking this seriously? I mean, if law enforcers are not taking this seriously, what about society in general?
Maybe it's time for women to take it seriously, because I believe that I'm with a group of young women who are pushing for a standalone sexual harassment bill, and I've realized that the experiences of sexual harassment are so diverse. It has happened to a lot of women I know. It has happened to my friends. It has happened to my colleagues. It has happened to my cousins. So I believe that
I think probably 90% of women experience sexual harassment in one way or another.
Yes. And this trend has started way before me. Like, for example, my mom herself was sexually harassed when she was working, and this was like 30 years ago. So I believe that there is something wrong with this society. There is something stopping women from speaking up, and this should not happen. So I believe that a national discourse on this must be undertaken.
If you want to share with the public in general, especially for men, the kind of common misconception that people have on sexual harassment. I earlier in this segment, we discussed that it's so vague that anything can be perceived as sexual harassment, even though it's just like a very random light joke.
Maybe it's not vague. It's just that, but I suppose like in terms of the dynamics with people, sometimes it can be a little bit vague. I think it's wrong to say it's vague lah, because then anything will go again.
But overall, like, if there's any kind of misconception about sexual harassment that you guys can entangle it to the public, what would that be? Mohani, maybe you can share first.
I would like for the public to stop thinking that it's a small matter. I would like people to take sexual harassment more seriously, and to have those words, sexual harassment in their vocabulary, in everyday vocabulary, so that like you said, the shift cannot happen on a legal and policy, cannot just happen on a legal and policy level, but also must come down to the grassroots. It must come down to our education system. It must trickle down to our daily conversation.
I mean, we don't even learn about sex education.
Yes.
We don't. I mean, even in moral and agama class, I believe is very little emphasis on boundaries and spaces.
Yes. Yeah, I think like I fully agree with what Mohani said. I think like I suppose where I'm coming from is that I think on the low, like not lower, on the grassroots levels, like on an individual basis, we need to empower ourselves in the sense that we have the internet now. There's information everywhere. You can Google it. There's also like strategies on how to deal with sexual harassment, or even finding out what sexual harassment is. I think like there are some women or girls, not even women, like girls who don't even realize they're being sexually harassed. Think about when you go to school and you meet flashers. That is sexual harassment. And some people just don't realize it's sexual harassment. I think like parents, teachers, all segments of society should really have a discourse about it, not just on the national level. But I think, of course, the national level will help create that discourse. But we on an individual basis, we can create that discourse also. Like we don't have to wait for somebody else to create it.
I think I read somewhere, probably it's popular all over the internet, about this group of Indian women. I think they wear like pink sari, and their job is to like bash any man that sexually harass any woman, which I thought is quite empowering. But just share with us, like, what kind of personal observation or any initiative that out there that people are addressing it, taking matters to their hand, but of course in a positive way, not in a negative way.
Well, I think like, I fully agree that sometimes like we need violence. I don't believe we need violence lah, because my philosophy is like, why fight fire with fire? Of course, I've been in a situation where it doesn't work, but and anger will come out, but violence is really not the way to go. It's really tough. Yeah, I'm thinking about all the times where I feel harassed. Like,
Maybe Mohani, you can add more about this. Like I said, I have a group called SMASH, Ladies Against Harassment, and I'm also part of a campaign called Sausa Respect Lah, which translate into "Don't you know? Show some respect." So that is a positive. I hope that it's a positive sign that we are doing something.
So any last message to share on sexual harassment to the general public?
I suppose like to everybody who feels sexually harassed or harassed in general, don't put yourself down. Don't think it's your fault. Google, research, and if you feel uncomfortable, you have a valid point, but also let's have a dialogue about it instead of just accusing people or hitting people.
Enjoying Smash. And what about you, Mohani?
Yeah, I agree with Paik. I believe that women victims of sexual harassment, or just in general victims of sexual harassment, should not feel embarrassed, should not blame themselves, and they should reach out to other young women or to other young people, to other people who have been sexually harassed, whether it's on the internet or whether writing to the newspapers. I believe that reaching out and speaking out will make sexual harassment a taboo. Instead of having it the other way around, where talking about sexual harassment is taboo, we want sexual harassment itself to be the taboo.
Oh, can I add on to Mohani's?
Oh,
And
yeah.
make sure you have a strong support system, like friends who back you up,
Okay. Anyway, thank you both Mohani and Paik for sharing your views.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.